Welcome back. In the last video, we saw the logic of blended finance. Now let's look at the actual instruments in the toolkit, because public money de-risks private capital can happen in several concrete ways. First, concessional senior debt. Development banks lend at below-market rates to improve a project's economics. Second, junior or first loss capital. Public or philanthropic money takes the bottom of the capital stack and absorbs initial losses, protecting the senior investors. The mechanism we studied in detail. Third, guarantees and risk insurance. A development bank or donor promises to cover specific risks, political, credit, or currency, so private lenders don't have to fear them. Fourth, technical assistance grants. Money to build local capacity and cut the transaction costs that make small deals uneconomic. And fifth, design or viability grants, funding the early stage development that gets a project pipeline off the ground in the first place. Notice that these range from hard financial instruments, debt, first loss capital, guarantees, to softer support like grants and capacity building. A well-designed blended deal often stacks several of these together, each closing a different gap between a good project and a bankable one. Let's make this vivid with a concrete working example, because the numbers really bring it to life. Imagine a $100 million climate project. We finance it with $20 million of concessional first loss capital at the bottom and $80 million of private senior capital on top. Straight away, notice the headline ratio: 80 million of private money mobilized by 20 million of public money. That's a mobilization ratio of 4 times. 20 million of public capital, 20 million of public capital unlocked 80 million of private. Now watch how the first loss cushion protects the private investors as losses mount. If the project loses 10%, $10 million, the junior tranche absorbs all of it. The senior, private investors lose nothing, fully protected. If it loses 20%, 20 million, the junior tranche is exactly wiped out, but the private investors are still fully protected, right up to the edge. Only if losses exceed 20%, say 30%, does the junior tranche max out at its 20 million, and the remaining 10 million finally starts to bite the senior investors. So that 20 million first loss buffer completely shields the private investors against any loss up to 20% of the project. You can see instantly why a cautious commercial investor would accept the senior tranche. They only get hurt in a genuinely bad outcome, and even then, less than they otherwise would. That's the whole trick in numbers. This brings us to genuinely cutting-edge research, a 2026 paper by Flammer, Giroux, and Heal, which is the first to systematically study how this catalytic capital is actually deployed in the real world. They build a model where a development finance institution has to allocate its scarce concessional capital across many competing projects, trying to maximize total societal impact while crowding in as much private money as possible. And the model reveals a core trade-off, which is subtle and important. Higher sustainability impact often requires more concessionality. The most transformative projects in the poorest, riskiest places are exactly the ones that need the biggest public subsidy to become viable. So the development bank constantly faces a dilemma: spread its money thin across many nearly commercial projects, or concentrate it on a few high-impact but subsidy-hungry ones. Then they test the model against real deal-level data from a major development bank, and the evidence fits beautifully. Projects with higher anticipated impact do receive greater concessionality, and concessionality is higher in countries with greater political risk and information asymmetry, precisely where private capital is most scared. And those deals more often include guarantees to cover exactly those risks. This is the first systematic evidence on how catalytic capital is really deployed, turning blended finance from anecdote into rigorous science. It's a lovely example of research catching up with a fast-moving field. Where does all this money actually go? This map shows the geography and it makes intuitive sense given geography, and it makes intuitive sense given everything we've said. Blended finance projects concentrate in sub-Saharan Africa, in South and Southeast Asia, and in Latin America. The darker the region, the more projects. These are exactly the places where the need is greatest, and where private capital, left alone, is most reluctant to go. Because of the political, currency, and credit risks we keep returning to. So the geography of blended finance is in effect a map of where the market fails most severely, where worthwhile projects and cautious capital most need a bridge between them. It's encouraging that the money flows toward genuine need, though, as we'll see in a moment, not always toward the very poorest countries. Let's ground this in the latest numbers, from Convergence's 2023 data. 3 figures. First, climate-blended finance reached $18.3 billion in 2023, and that $1 billion in 2023. And that was up a striking 120% year on year, so the market is growing fast. Second, on average, every $1 of concessional capital mobilized about $2.20 of private capital. And third, 34% of deals used guarantees or risk insurance. Consistent with the research finding that guarantees are the tool of choice in the riskiest markets. So the market is real, growing quickly and increasingly reliant on guarantees. But hold on to that second number, around $2 of private money per public dollar, because it's the number that grounds the debate we turn to now. Let's end Part E with an honest assessment, the promise and the limits of blended finance. The promise is genuine and powerful, it's catalytic. It stretches scarce public money and channels private capital toward where it's needed most. The closest thing we have to a lever that multiplies limited aid budgets into large investment flows. But now the sober limits. First, the mobilization ratios are modest, around 2 times in practice, far below the much larger multiples once hoped for. Early enthusiasts imagined $1 public dollar pulling in 10 or 20 private. The reality is closer to 2. Second, the money tends to concentrate in middle-income countries, not the very poorest, precisely because those poorest places are so risky that even heavy de-risking can't make deals work. So blended finance often reaches the missing middle rather than the bottom. And third, there are real unresolved debates about additionality. Would some of these deals have happened anyway? And about subsidy efficiency. Are we getting enough impact per public dollar? The path forward, everyone agrees, runs through standardization and better data from bodies like the OECD and Convergence, so the field can scale credibly and prove its worth. So, blended finance is a genuinely important tool, not a magic wand, powerful where it fits, but no substitute for the deeper work of reducing the underlying risks that scare capital away in the first place. Let's recap. Blended finance deploys a toolkit, concessional debt, first loss capital, guarantees, and grants. And our worked example showed how a 20 million first loss cushion can mobilize 80 million of private money and shield it from loss. Frontier research by Flammer and co-authors shows higher impact, riskier projects rightly get more concessionality and more guarantees. The climate market hit $18 billion in 2023, mobilizing around $2 private dollars per public dollar, real but more modest than once hoped, and concentrated in middle-income countries. In the next video, we turn to the other half of net zero, not just cutting emissions, but pulling carbon back out of the air. Carbon removal. See you there.